Today's topic is going to be very timely with all of the cybersecurity threats that are happening out in the world today. You can't turn on the news, you can't read a newspaper, you can't really read a blog or an article that has to do with anything that's in the news or related to IT. And you can't, and you see that indeed there is a lot of cybersecurity threats. And so today's topic is going to be about how to avoid getting hacked. And I really want to focus on some very practical things that we can do as business owners and entrepreneurs, and even as just citizens, just people trying to protect their own stuff. We're going to kind of talk about the state of the industry, and then we're going to get into some very specifics on items that you need to have on your network today, right now, to protect yourself and to protect your reputation. So without further ado, we're going to start on how to avoid getting hacked. All right, who is Phillip Long? I'm Phillip Long, and I'm really more of a technologist and an entrepreneur, and I really love technology solutions, and I love the understanding of how the breaches are happening and developing solutions and systems to put in place so that we can protect ourselves and our clients and really our citizens here in this local market along the Gulf Coast on cybersecurity threats. I've worked in this industry actually now for almost 20 years, and we have 600 clients, and kind of our focus is between Gulfport and Gulf Breeze, right here along the I-10 corridor on the Alabama, Mississippi, Florida Gulf Coast right here. I currently own 5 different types of business. Actually, I think I own 6 businesses now, but ideally, what we've done under the BIS Technology Group heading that really relates to the listeners here is that I do under Veritas Consulting, we have a consulting group where we're doing a lot of business coaching, some life coaching, as well as things related to cybersecurity and security risk assessments. Also, we have a marketing company where we're doing digital marketing, social media marketing, search engine optimization. Then, of course, the IT side of things that we're going to talk about today, as well as we own an office equipment company where we do we're authorized dealers for Canon, Kia Sierra, HP, and the like. One thing that's, I think, important that really puts me into a position where I have authority to speak on these topics is that I've been trained. I'm a certified information system security professional. It is the highest tier of certification you can get for security, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit as we move through the presentation. Let's kind of turn our attention to local attacks. I think it's important to kind of think about not really from a national or even a global level, but the focus sometimes is that we're like ostriches with our head in the sand, and if our buddy didn't get hacked, or if it didn't happen to me or somebody I know, we think it's not happening. Well, it is indeed happening. It's happening at a much higher rate than what's even reported on, because most people don't want to admit it, and they don't want the public knowing, because there's a big problem in the IT world as it relates to cybersecurity and breaches. Because if you get hacked, you're looked at as either irresponsible or possibly even incompetent. And that's just the automatic de facto stance that people take on you. Whereas, if you had your car broken into, your home broken into, you'd be violated, and the police would come rally around you and all those kind of things. So it's really important, I think, to recognize that, and it really heightens the bar for our interest and our focus that needs to be around protecting our data and our client and employee data. FUS Ackleys was breached here. It's probably been 6-8 months ago at this point, but ultimately their credit card processor, their point of sale processor was breached, and they were able to sit on some data for a period of time and ultimately collect credit cards from the patrons of FUS Ackleys. And ultimately, they took that information and then they exploited it. They ran charges against FUS Ackleys clients' credit cards. Well, certainly, if that would have happened to you, you probably weren't going back to FUS Ackleys for a while, or that stung or whatever. And you know, at the end of the day, you held in your mind FUS Ackleys accountable because they should have been, you know, doing their due diligence or have done their due diligence and practicing due care in protecting your credit card information. And ultimately, that was that trust was broken. And I'm certain, I mean, of course, I don't know the inside track on all that, but I'm certain their sales probably went down from it. It cost them well beyond what it was over just the you know, the kind of the money right there that possibly, you know, they had to pay back or anything that it took. It cost a lot of money in reputation damage, what cost them, and it's going to continue to cost them. Let's talk about the city of Atlanta in Georgia. They had a breach, well, actually ransomware, and they had were ransom, and they were subject to pay $52,000 in order to get their data, the encryption key to unlock their data. Well, they chose, or possibly even from the reports I'm seeing and hearing, is that their IT people kind of had the news come in and they showed the screen where the bad actors were, you know, ransoming them, and they got spooked and they took down the site where you could pay the bitcoins for $52,000 to do that, you know, to pay and get the encryption key to unlock the data. Well, so they didn't even have the opportunity from that point on to pay the $52,000. Well, long story short is it cost them $26 million is the bill right now because of that breach. So, you know, we kind of want to juxtapose that, I guess, with the city of Leeds, Alabama. They were ransomed, and I think the fee was $12,000, and they simply paid it. And they got their data unencrypted. The bad guys got $12,000, and you know, not a lot of damage. So we have. I just want to kind of show two different scenarios there, and the bigger point of all of this is that it costs money to do it wrong. And it costs not only money, but it costs reputation, it costs frustration. And at the end of the day, we really want to put ourselves into a position to where we're not hacked. You know, sometimes, you know, business owners, entrepreneurs, we focus on the money that, you know, we're penny wise and pound foolish, and I really want to debunk that, and I want to talk about and try to change our mindset to, you know, being proactive in this arena, because this threat, these issues are absolutely 100% not going away. They're absolutely 100% not getting smaller, they're getting larger. So we want to focus on that. So let's talk a little bit about threats. All right, living here on the coast, we often talk about, you know, hurricanes. Well, the reality is that hurricanes are indeed devastating, and you know, usually it's the water that comes from it that is so devastating. But one good thing, if there is a good thing about a hurricane, is that we know about that threat. Uh, for literally, you know, a couple of weeks, a lot of times that it's coming. And, you know, within a week, we know, oh no, it's going to be within our zone. And within a couple of days, we have to know, oh, okay, we're going to be more than likely hit. So we can take measures to protect ourselves. We do have tornadoes, but usually here again, kind of focusing on our market segment, usually they're not that bad. Now, there has been a few that have caused some pretty extensive damage, you know, over the last years, but as a rule, we don't have devastating tornadoes that just basically grind up, you know, a mile swath of land for 10 miles or whatever, like they do in the Midwest. So as it relates to disasters, really, you know, what we see more happening, and statistically what happens more, is the water damage. That's a busted pipe, something like that, that will cause more damage, not something on that on the scale of a, you know, of a natural disaster per se. Another one that is really bigger than most people give it give it credence to is employee errors. These are one of the biggest reasons why data is lost. Something really bad happens is something that somebody didn't do, or something that they did do. They clicked on a malicious link, or they forgot to do something. This is a major component of it that causes disaster. IBM did a study a few years back, and they reported that 95% of data loss was caused by human error. So this is a really, really, really big part. And the shame of it is we don't spend a lot of time training and putting focus on our employees, and really kind of coaching them up. We treat infinite problems with finite solutions. And what I'm saying there is that this threat, this risk, is never going away, and we'll touch it once a year, once every few years, and we think that that's going to be a finite type solution is going to give us infinite security and results, and that's simply just not the case. Employee thefts is really big. I've been involved over my years just here on the coast again that employees have stolen. They've taken simple, Dropbox and uploaded a ton of company data into their personal Dropbox files, and in doing so, they stole from the company. They stole property. And at the end of the day, you really need to have a team, or at least a session with somebody who can go over what are these threats and how protected are we. We do not want to be the ostrich with our head stuck in the sand. I've been in this market for 20 years. I'm in a peer group with some guys all over the nation, and I hate to admit it, but our culture here is not proactive. We are very reactive in the way that we treat these types of threats, and I know it makes us a much bigger target. Another thing is cyber attacks, and we're going to talk more about that later, and that is a big threat for us. It is something that is very prevalent. It's happening all the time. There are 6,500 new threats born every hour. I'm going to repeat that: 6,500 threats born every hour on average, which is an incredible amount of threats, and it's an incredible problem in trying to secure people, because that means that all these threats are happening, and it's very difficult to protect against something that you don't even know about. And there's a ton of things that you don't know about happening every hour. So it's a big problem. And when I kind of get to the solution phase of this conversation that we're having today, I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about ways to mitigate that risk and to protect your company and your reputation. One of the biggest threats out there is ransomware. And it's ultimately the way that multiple means of delivery that this can happen, where they ultimately, you click on something, or they gain access to your computer and they encrypt it. And they encrypt it with the standard encryption technology that's out and used throughout the world. It is very, very, very effective. And they lock your files, and they have the key. And in order to get the key, you got to pay them money. That's ransomware in a sentence, and it's happening all the time, and it's very, very, very challenging to stop it from happening, because ultimately they are using us, or our employees, as the ones to pull the trigger, if you will. Ransomware attacks grew by 97% in the last 2 years. They're in America alone, they are estimating that that's a $25 million a year business in that alone. And here's the bigger part of that: Americans do not pay the ransomware. I forget the exact statistic, but it's like 3 or 4% of Americans actually pay the ransom. They'll suffer through, like this city of Atlanta did, and cost them a ton of extra money, but they don't pay the ransom. And so that $25 million, like in Canada, for instance, it is like over 80% they pay the ransom. Now, are they smarter than us? I don't know. You make the call. They're probably in essence, saving themselves a lot of money just by paying the ransom, because they're in a position where it's going to cost them a lot more to reconstruct that data, the reputation damage, et cetera, but they're also enabling the bad guys. So of the $25 million that is they estimate for America, that's really extremely low, because in Canada it is very much high. Now, that doesn't mean that we have less incidents. It just means that we don't pay the ransom as much. Another thing is that this threat, there's 1.5 million new phishing sites created every month. Now, this is, again, I'll talk about it a little bit later. They're shifting their focus a little bit on how they are delivering this ransomware, and this is delivering through websites here. This is a company called Cybersecurity Ventures. They say that in 2019 will be the year of ransomware rising. A new business will fall victim to ransomware every 14 seconds in 2019 and every 11 seconds by 2021. So what we're seeing is not a decline by any stretch of the imagination, but a rapid incline. And quite frankly, they do it because it works. And more of the bad actors are jumping on board because, again, quite frankly, it just works. 1 in 3 small businesses who paid the ransom never got their data back. Now, this is a trend that used to be 1 in 5. So there's some things going on here that are trending in the wrong direction, maybe, and it may hurt ransomware getting them paid because they're actually not fulfilling their promise and getting the data back or whatever. But still, 1 in 3 is the current small businesses who paid the ransom and they never got their data back. So the bad guys aren't being good guys, and they're taking the money and running rather than actually producing the key and helping the client get their data unencrypted. So there's a chance that even if you did pay the 1 in 3 chance that even if you did pay the ransom, you're not going to get your data back. One thing that is huge, and it's 91% of cyber attacks start with a phishing type email. Your email, if you want to have an aha moment, you need to have it right now as it relates to your risk, and your risk being related to email. Email is your #1 risk as it relates to cybersecurity in the month of May of 2019. 91% of cyber attacks start with a phishing email. So we want to lower our risk in a quick way, the simplest way. We want to protect our email. Major way here, and I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. Let's talk about emails and looking at an email and trying to discover. This education piece right here is very important because you want to be able to look at emails. If it's the 91% of successful threats are coming in email, we want to be able to take a moment and we want to be able to train our staff on looking at an email. Think before you click. One thing I always like to say about email is, and I ask usually when I do this in a live environment, what is proper business etiquette here in our environment on the coast to allowing emails, like how quick do I have to respond is what I'm trying to say. What is a business etiquette? And usually I get 24 hours. And to me personally, I'm more of a man of action, I guess, and I usually think about 4 hours. But a lot of times I hear from the crowd 24 hours. So understanding that whenever you get an email, you don't have to respond within 2 minutes of receiving it. Matter of fact, I do some time management courses, and I tell people turn off your automated reminder when a new email comes in, because it will worry you to death. It'll stress you out. It will divert your attention to the task at hand, and you'll be, taking brain cycles and putting them over on worrying about what email came in, and it's going to not be good for you. You need to turn that off and just schedule times that you check your mail. All right, so I digress. Let me get back on topic here. This email right here, some things you want to think about. One of it is, who the heck is the IRS really going to ask me to verify my information over email? The answer is no. They would never, ever, ever do that to you. Another thing is you want to verify, the sender. Check them out. Think about it. Hover over that link. Another thing here we have is this that we've noticed, bad grammar, bad spelling. Now, the problem with this is the bad guys are getting better at this. And a lot of this that used to be coming from overseas is now coming stateside because it's so effective and it's so profitable. Also, links. You can hover over a suspicious link and you can kind of see where it's taking you, so that, you would think that if you hovered over this link, it would be taking you to the IRS website. Well, it wouldn't be. It would be taking you to the bad guys' website so that they can inject your machine with some type of malicious software so that they could remote control it, capture your keystrokes, encrypt your files, etc., etc. A lot of times emails are threatening. There's one scam that's going around basically saying, hey, I've been watching your video and I've got all kind of video on you in some compromising situations, and don't worry, I went ahead and downloaded your contact list, and if you don't pay me this money or give me these Apple gift cards or Amazon gift cards or whatever, I'm going to release those videos out to all of your people in your contact database. That's pretty threatening. I've had clients send me that, and it alarmed them. It upset them because people don't want to. They don't want to have that information, somebody watching them on their camera. We have little camera slides that we offer for free to people so they can kind of cover their camera, kind of slide the lens cover, if you will, over it. Get with me. I'd be happy to give you some of those for your staff. Another thing is a fake invoice is the #1 type of phishing email sent out. Well, and it makes sense because you're like, whoa, I didn't buy that. Click, bang, you're infected. Because your reaction to, having somebody, buy things on your behalf without your knowledge is not something that is, it brings out an emotion in you, and it makes you very quickly respond. So that's one way that they're tricking us to click without thinking. Let's talk about some examples. UPS tracking. A lot of times, you have packages coming in. Amazon is another one. I usually, in a live event, I'll ask people, how many of you guys have an Amazon, package being delivered? And literally, sometimes as many as 50% of the crowd will raise their hand. We buy a lot of things online, and we want to know if there's a follow-up or something happening with that package. Banking information. One time, I have a burner computer that I pretty much can, reset to factory format, if you will, very quickly and easily with a particular piece of software. So I'll click on these links just to see what they're gonna do. And you click on this and it'll ask you for all types of information: your name, address, social security number, your mama's number, your kids' names. They'll just basically ask you a ton of information to gather to verify that you are who you are. And you would be surprised. People will click on that. They will fill out a ton of information and just basically give it to the bad guys that they can and will use against you. Also, another one that's going on is kind of like a relationship type thing. We've given our life away to social media and LinkedIn and the like. And you could look on my LinkedIn profile, and I'm connected to a lot of people within my company, and they will use that information to exploit us and say, hey, you have copies of the PDFs. I'm getting a new bank loan or whatever, and I need this, I need that, and they'll have the bookkeeper basically, or the accountant on staff or whatever, send information to them that is, personal identifiable information that contains a lot of value. So what do you do when you come across a phishing email? Every week I get probably anywhere from 5, 10, 15 emails where people that are, my clients or people that have heard me speak, and they send me stuff and say, hey, check this out. And I appreciate that, honestly, because of I have the ability to stay abreast of what is coming in, what's happening, how are the bad guys trying to trick us. So what do you do? Well, really, you want to check with the company or person who sent it to you, and I think it's really important that you do that, because again, if somebody sent you an email, you don't have to respond in 5 minutes. Obviously, from our market and my anecdotal stuff, they think you got at least a day. You certainly have hours to respond, because again, if it was important, they'd call you. So if there's a question about it, call the person and verify it. It's really, it's pretty simple to do. Pick up the phone. I think we're a society that, of course, is moving away from that. Another one is send that email to somebody, an IT provider or an IT department, to let them check it out. Because, I've heard people, and one other thing I want to make mention of, I only click on things from people I know. Well, that's really kind of short-sighted, because what happens if the people get hacked? And I've seen it personally with my own eyes, where people have been hacked and they send out things to the contact list, like I spoke of earlier. And the problem with that mentality is what happens if somebody gets hacked? Well, then you just open yourself up to a blind trust. We have to be on guard at a higher level than just that. Let's talk about, this data that's being stolen. Where is it being sold at? And it's being sold ultimately on the dark web. And I want to talk a little bit about the dark web. It's a place that I don't recommend anyone going. It's not a good place. There's not good things happening out there, but it's basically an anonymous place where you can browse and purchase and do things using anonymous money, which is like Bitcoin, where there's a way that you can pay for things without without being tracked. And it's just the same way with the website. They can't track you on that. Talk about the surface web. One thing about the surface web is ultimately places that you go where you don't have to sign in. And, for instance, if you just go to my website, you don't necessarily have to sign in to look at the items that are on my website. But what you'll find is that most sites are in what we call the deep web. That's where you do have to sign in, and it poses a big potential security risk. And I'll tell you how. Like even your Google account, like when you go to search just your search engine, most people are logged into that. Your Facebook, your Netflix, your bank, your everything else that is going on is 100% going to have to have a credentials. Well, most credentials, like username, if you will, is your email address. That's known. And then password. Well, 65% of people, is the statistic that I saw recently, use the same username and password across multiple platforms. What I'm saying is that your Netflix account may very well be your Office 365 account. Username, email address, password, same password. Same way with your banking, and so on and so on and so on. So at the end of the day, if I can get any means by which, any account by which you're logging into in this deep web, I have access to a lot of other things that you may or may not have out there. And the bad guys know how to use social media and social engineering to understand who you are, what you are. They know what bank you might be using based off of your address, and so on and so forth, because of statistically people use certain banks that are in a certain proximity, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of information that can be gleaned from any one of these deep web services or websites or that you're using. And then, of course, the dark web itself that we spoke about here is is important to understand, and that is where ultimately you use an anonymous browser. It's called Tor, and you can log in. You are now free to browse the internet anonymously. Congratulations. And it's again, it's like Internet Explorer or Chrome or anything else, but it's a browser that's made and used for anonymity and privacy. And what are the things that are out on that browser are really, most of it, probably 90% of it, is bad stuff. You can look here, you have credit cards that are being sold online, $35.51 for 2 credit card info, name, address, phone, the CVV, the expiration, and the secret CVV code out there. We have all types of drugs that are being sold out there. Another little thing here, I've downloaded this book for $3.11. You can buy the Hacker's Black Book, and it's very detailed, it's very good, and it tells you ultimately how to hack things, how to do things, and this will make any junior high level person really a hacker with they got time on their hands. They can invest that time and they can become a hacker. They can find out ways to exploit and use this. Another major entity out there is called Silk Road. They're the ones that actually are big into the distribution of drugs and things of that nature. Well, the cost of info, credit cards, $50, $250, depends on who they are, what they really have. The banking industry, of course, because it's real money, has been proactive in blocking this. So a credit card is not good for long. But again, you get a couple of key strikes on a credit card, you can use that to make some money. Online banking could be huge if it's the right bank account. $1,000 to $2,000 you could sell in online banking login information, because they know that they can get a possibly tenfold result off of that. And if you were to, as an investor, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, you're looking for return on investment. These guys think the same way. Social Security card, that's long been, you can get a dead person's Social Security card. You get whatever you want nowadays. Not worth much, $1. A driver's license, a good valid driver's license, $20. A good passport could be used for $1,000 to $2,000. They would pay that for a good passport because of just think about it. I mean, we have, people trying to hurt us. This could be very valuable to them as an investment into, getting into the United States of America on a valid passport. Let's talk about some errors that I see happening here on the coast that employees are causing risk to our organization. Remember that 95% of successful breaches are very much caused by people, and I think that's something to really think about. I want to repeat that: 95% of breaches are caused by people. So I think it's important to keep that top of mind presence. Another thing, or one thing, that the number one problem that I see is that employees checking personal emails on work computers. I'm going to get to the solution on that in just a minute, but if I had to secure an environment, and email being my number one risk, and I'm allowing people to check their personal email on my computers, I am very much at risk, and I see it happening all the time, and it's really an easy way to fix that. Password management, I said it earlier, 65% of people are using the same password across multiple platforms. We use a product called LastPass, LASTPASS.com. There's a free version for a home user, and there's a corporate version where, we allow, like, our people don't even know what the password is because it's saved in their browser. And if they terminate with the company or whatever, we take away their rights, and all that credentialing is taken away. And just a frustration of a shared account, and they force us to change password. This really is a big time saver as well as an increased security measure for your organization. But you need to be changing your password. They need to be passphrases. They need to, not be, standard things that we very well and much know about. So it's important to manage passwords. Another thing is just leaving files around. Not having least privilege enforced. You don't need your receptionist doesn't need to have access to the 401k records. And I see it all the time. That data's laying around, not secured, and even on a file share within the company, we see all the time that too many people have access to files that they don't need to have access to. Another one is just clicking on bad links, malicious links. I said that earlier about, talked about the number of, phishing sites, people building websites. And it's going to become a much larger threat as time goes on because they're able to now buy SSL certificates. When you see the HTTPS, the cat's out of the bag, the genie's out of the bottle. The bad guys can now buy certificates so that they can make their sites HTTPS. At one time we saw that. We saw, protected by Komodo or Norton or whoever. Well, now that really doesn't mean a lot because the bad guys can now protect their phishing sites with malicious links in them by the same type of technology that the good guys are using. So it's a big problem. It's a topic unto itself in a way, but you really need to be protected about that. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Another one is not disposing properly of hard drives. You can't give your computers away anymore because the data on them can get into the wrong hands. You've got to properly destroy that hard drive. There's some other data that can be written in some other areas, but really for most businesses here on the coast, if we're getting those hard drives out of those machines and we're shredding them, and we do certified data destruction because a lot of people are, from a compliance standpoint, they're required, but it's just a great way. I think we're charging $25. I mean, it's really, I've got a deal worked out with a guy, and I'm not making any money on that, but I really want to protect our clients so that their data doesn't get out there because it's very painful when it does. It's very costly. Another thing is not managing backups. I go on sites all the time and they don't know. They just think they're having a backup because they got some device plugged in or they signed up for some service and they're not watching it. They're not managing it. I have 2 people on staff and that's all they do is manage backups. It is that important. I put backups into the security realm because at the end of the day, if something bad did happen, and again, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and we need to change our mindset because it's going to happen. If you stay in business, these threats are increasing. Well, hey, you know what? The market pool, the threats are increasing at a rate that is, probably, this is just off the cuff here, but 10 times, 50 times the rate of new businesses coming on, the people coming online that can accept that risk or that threat. So that means that you're going to get hacked. It's your chances of getting hacked are greater today than they were yesterday. They're going to be greater tomorrow than they were today. And we need to get that in our gut because that's the real deal. Do not be the ostrich with your head in the sand because you're going to get hurt. It's just a matter of when. You need to be watching and managing your own backup. Buyer beware. Our biggest competitor is I got a guy. And I'm going to tell you, a small team or I got a guy cannot do all the aspects that it takes in order to protect you. That's just the reality. You cannot manage what you cannot see. And if you're not managing your backups, you are in a big world of hurt. Unencrypted company devices. This is something that is really important is having your devices encrypted so that in the event that you were to lose them, it's not a worry. Even Health and Human Services with the HIPAA, one of the rules is that you have to have your devices encrypted. Well, the encryption is so good and so effective that if you were to lose a device with EPHI, electronic health information from your patients, you don't even have to report it because the encryption's that good, and it's cheap. It's not hard to manage. It's something that companies need to think about, the information that's on mobile devices, and with just the amount of mobile devices that are being used. I mean, it's insane, and the capabilities of these mobile devices, they're really not, they're computers is what they are. And they got operating systems, and those operating systems have exploits. You check email on them, you have apps that could be done, and it's just a world of possible threats come in whenever we do these devices. And hey, that's over, man. We're using them, and we're going to use them more as time goes on. So that risk is going up. Another thing is putting infected USB keys into a computer. I always use the example of Stuxnet. This is where the Israelis really set back the Iranian nuclear centrifuge. Where they're centrifuging to get a more pure product, and they did it by for nuclear weapons, I should say, and they did it by putting out a USB stick in the parking lot. And I can't remember all of the details. Maybe it said financials or, top secret or something, with a sticker on the side of a USB key. And somebody picked it up and they stuck it in the machine. And they happened to be using Siemens controllers to manage their centrifuges, to manage the interface between the computers and the centrifuges, and it changed the spin rate so that it reported wrong. So they ultimately set back. They're thinking that they're making and they're moving forward, and ultimately they messed up the controls so that the product, the hardware was not going to produce good product because they had changed the rate at which it spun and so on and so forth. Set them back 18 months. But another example is I believe it was the Russians that had given a gift bag out at a UN meeting, and their devices were infected. I made mention recently of Kevin Mitnick. He was the first guy that was a big-time hacker who turned good after he got caught and got sentenced to prison. And he's really very much a very cybersecurity expert at this point, and he uses his powers for good. But he does online hacking. I saw it at an event I was at, and it would scare you to death because he's using various means to deliver a piece of software to people, and a USB stick being one of them, another one being a link in an email, another one being a link in a web page, and so on and so forth. The people click, it runs a tiny little script, and then boom, he's got root access, meaning administrative access. He can watch the camera, he can check your email, he can log your keystrokes, he can download and upload files to your computer. And he's doing it live on stage, and it would just blow your mind as to how easy it is. So let's kind of move to, what do you do if you get hacked? The first thing you do is you want to disconnect that computer from the internet, because most likely it's going to be not only exploiting data from that particular computer, but also from another computers that it's connected to on the network. You want to shut the machine down so that it can stop doing whatever it's doing. Without power, it can't continue to move forward. You want to contact your IT provider right away, or your IT department, and say, hey, something bad has happened. This kind of relates to culture, because I've seen it. I've done this for 20 years. And if you've got a culture where there's not a lot of trust on the internal team, people will get themselves infected. They'll click on something and they'll make it worse because they don't want to tell anybody, because there's no trust in that relationship. And they will, do a lot of harm to the company, because they'll let this malicious, I should say, software run on a computer. And the average life that malicious software runs on a computer is about a year, and before it's discovered. So you really want to have an environment of openness to say, hey, if you click on something, please let somebody know right away. Another thing you may want to do is jump on and and send that notification out to the entire organization, because once they have a site exploited, they really focus their attention on exploiting it further. And it's like they tell the bad guys, hey, we got a live one over here. Like if you get ransomware and they were effective and you get it cleaned up, you get the backup restored, if you watch the firewall logs, that site will absolutely be getting tore up with activity trying to get it exploited. So once you've been hacked, they let the word out to know that you're a vulnerable target, and other people try to hack you even better. One other thing I should say here is that you need to report this to like the FBI. And again, we don't, a lot of times, especially on small businesses, stuff happens. They don't tell anybody because they don't want anybody to know. But you can tell the FBI, and unless they call it tar pitting, and unless you have to, for legal reasons, unless they have to disclose that for some reason, they won't tell a soul. They'll help you, and they can collect that data to again learn and to understand how the bad guys are acting, so that information can get up the chain to get a better level of security for everybody else by knowing how you got exploited. All right, so let's talk about some policies real quick, and I'm going to get to some measures that you can take to prevent bad things from happening. You really need to have a bring your own device policy. Like I said earlier, more and more people are bringing their own device, and I'm talking more about their own laptop. They may be loading your software on their laptop at home, or their computer at home, or their mobile phone. And you need to have a policy on how things get managed, because from a litigation standpoint, if you don't protect yourself, if you don't inform and have your employees sign so that they understand what's going to happen if something gets lost and how do they report it to you and all these things, you're the one that holds the water on on if something bad happens, because they're going to say that you didn't practice due diligence. Excuse me, you didn't do your due diligence by having them sign, and you're not practicing due care in the way that you're managing that information that's on these devices, and you're going to be the guy holding the bag. And ultimately, you don't want to do that, and you can correct some of that risk, and you can mitigate and lower that risk level threshold by having this device bring your own device policy in place. Another one's internet usage policy. I was on a case that I was expert witness on, and ultimately, I don't want to go into too many details, it's kind of bad, but ultimately somebody was in an office sending some pictures out to somebody who wasn't their husband, and that's how it all got started. And ultimately, this young lady sued the business owner because they didn't tell her, they couldn't prove that they couldn't be proved, they didn't tell her she couldn't do that at the office. And it makes a lot of common sense that you shouldn't be doing that stuff at the office, but ultimately the world that we live in, the onus is on the business. So you want to have an acceptable internet usage policy, as well as this next one, use of company equipment. How can this company equipment be used? And it needs to be in writing, and the employee needs to sign these things, because when something heads south, ultimately the employee can say, hey, my boss never told me that. And maybe you did tell them, but you don't have a way to prove that you told them. Whereas these documents can say, no, indeed, I told them, and they signed on, May the 28th at 11:55 a.m., whatever, So you really want to have these policies in place, because they're going to protect you. And talking about risk and things of that nature, kind of talking about how to stop hackers in their tracks. There's really three pillars whenever you talk about security, and oftentimes in my world, we focus a lot on the cyber side of it. Well, really, it's just one part of it. One is the governance or the documents that you have in place. They're very important to have that in place. And with that is also the training of your employees is a very important component that you want to have in place. And these are very easily and very doable type things that you can put in place. The second is the physical aspects of your office. How are you? There are locks on the files. Can anybody access anything? Can they access it from a cyber standpoint? Is the company share file have a lot of data in it that the average user doesn't? You need to have that structured where common user has access to a set of files, the manager, and then maybe the C-level suite has, and then maybe the owner has a whole tier to themselves. But you need to structure that, and it needs to be thought out. Not difficult, just really needs to have somebody that can walk you through that and to spend a moment to really put yourself in a position so if something does head south, or when something heads south, you're taken care of. All right, I want to talk to you a minute about a defense in depth strategy. And what's important to understand from the get-go on this is that you want to build this strategy, or this is our strategy, but you want to build this strategy in a way that is above the end user's head, which means basically we call it security through obscurity. It's obscure, it's happening, but they don't even know it's happening unless they violate a policy, and they can't get their hands on it to turn it off, because you will see end users making decisions that would not be in your best interest by turning things off, because say a filter doesn't let them go and do browsing pornography or going to a gambling site. If they could get their hands on it and they want to do that, they may turn that stuff off. So one concept that I want you to understand from the get-go is you want to set this up in a way that the end user can't modify. The second concept is that there's 6,500 new threats being born every hour, 6,500 new threats born every hour. You want to set that up so that you have a series of filtering, and you want to have this traffic being looked at by different tools or different components, and we'll go over them in a moment. And you want to have the people who own those tools or manage those tools be different companies, because there's so many threats that you're not able to one company can block every threat. So you want to have multiple companies with different security philosophies look over it. When I say companies, not necessarily like we're a company that does IT security, but the products that we sell you. And I'll give you some examples here. But I want to start with, first and foremost, our biggest risk. Our biggest risk is our people. And one of the things that we want to do security awareness training, we really want to have a security awareness culture. If you look at how how people respond to training, it's kind of looks like a stair step. And if you do a training, you kind of step up, the awareness is there, and for a moment, they'll be using those practices, but then it'll decline off. So what you have to do is have given intervals that are pre-thought of, beforehand, so that hey, during our all hands meeting, we're going to have a 5-minute section on it that talks about security. Well, for everybody on this call here, we're going to give them free security awareness training for their entire staff. Very important. It's really cool if you're in any compliance held industry, you're supposed to be doing this, and it takes you through. They have to take a 20 little questions they have to answer. They have scored an 80 or above, and they get a certificate that you would then want to store on file so that you can say, hey, yeah, we did our due diligence, we put that in place, and we practice due care because these guys are actually producing a certificate showing that they've taken the training. And then another thing is dark web scanning. Like I said earlier, the deep web, where we're putting in all of our credentials and we're using the same username and password in all of those environments, we want to know if somebody gets hacked. and we want to know that our credentials are now exploited, so we can simply get out there and change them across the board. You want to have that dark web scanning going on out there. Another thing that is big is this advanced threat protection on your email. Of course, spam is a problem. It's very time consuming, but of course this comes with spam protection. But we're talking cybersecurity here. We want to, of course, knock out the ones that are just pure spam because some of those do have security risk in them. A lot of them are just noise that clutter up your inbox. But more than that, we want to have something that is actually encrypting our mail that we send. When we send the file out, that Excel file, to our accountant or to our 401k people with everybody's everything in it, with their social security number, their address, how much money they're contributing, and possibly spouses, all kind of stuff in there. We want to send that with encryption so that it can't be read by anyone. The next thing we want to do is we want to have all of our mail checked so that the links in it are protected, so that that's been pre-scanned to verify that that link is protected. And we also want to have our attachments inspected to make sure there's nothing malicious in that. One little tip that you can use is that when somebody sends you an attachment, most email browsers like Microsoft Outlook, you can preview that file. And if it's trying to send you to Dropbox to go click on something to open it, that's called bad stuff. Don't open it. Just, don't do it. But really, ahead of that, you need to have it pre-scanned so that stuff just simply won't come through. Another thing, password management. I kind of touched on that before. Very important. And there's about 8 different levels of password. You want to have it to where the end user can't simply change the password to what the previous one was. Because what you'll have is people using, password A, and then they'll flip back around and use password B, and then the next time it makes them change, they'll use password A again. And it's it's a bad practice. So you want to have a system that they can't control that'll force them to change it. Of course, complexity rules and all the like. We can talk more about that offline. Another one is a cloud-based firewall. This product is by Cisco that we use, and it's very effective. One of the cool things and one of the big driving forces inside of technology today is big data. They call it big data, and ultimately that is that we have the capability to store an enormous amount of information now, and they're doing it. And like Cisco, for instance, about 35 to 40% of the world's traffic is going across their DNS servers, which is basically converting a name to an IP address. When you go to google.com, it goes to an IP address. Well, these servers, and they're all over the world, and it's happening what would seem seamlessly to us. There's a lot of traffic copying going on out there, and it says, oh, you go here. Well, the beauty of that with this big data portion of it is, and with Cisco in particular in collecting this data, is the fact that they've mapped the internet. They know the shady networks. They know the network that has gotten gotten in or is beginning to send out bad traffic, and they can put them on a blacklist so that you can't access them. Not only does it protect you when you're in the office, but it also protects you when you're out of the office with all these mobile users that are moving around with our company data on their machines. So it's really important. We can talk more offline, but it is a major step forward in protecting it. I said that there was being able to capture this data, but also be able to ask questions of that data. Artificial intelligence is what that's called, to determine whether something is malicious or suspicious and so on and so forth. They collect this data, and the beauty of it is that all of this is happening out in the cloud, whereas the next thing on the slide here is this next generation endpoint security, which is what we would call antivirus. And with that, that's something most antivirus products update about once a day. Well, if there's 6,500 new threats being born every hour, multiply that by 24, and there's a lot of threats that your antivirus doesn't know about. And I'm going to talk to you guys here on the Gulf Coast. Just having antivirus on your computers, and worse yet, having free AVG or free Avast, they don't come with the security level that you need. You are not protected. I'm calling your head to come out of the sand and listen to what I'm telling you. If you have just antivirus, you are at huge risk. And if you're using free antivirus, you're at even a bigger risk. So, but the beauty about a good product, this next generation stuff that's out, is it's pre-scanning that stuff in the cloud so that your updates are happening in real time, first off, and second off, it's also watching behaviors on your machine so that if your machine's doing something that's a little suspicious, it can actually stop it. Another thing we talked about earlier is this DPI SSL firewall, which that stands for Deep Packet Inspection on Secure Socket Layer. Basically, it can scan that file that is in the HTTPS website, and that's really becoming, it's important. It's becoming more important on two levels. Number one, you see everybody is now having to go to HTTPS on their website. Pretty much Google will sink you in your rankings if you don't do that. So if your website doesn't have a SSL certification, if it doesn't say HTTPS, it'll put up there in the browser not secure. And Google's going to hurt you on your rankings. So from a marketing perspective, you need to take care of that. But from a security perspective, anything that happens on that website can be sniffed out by the bad guys. Well, I said it earlier, but ultimately the bad guys now can buy these SSLs. So they can embed malicious links inside of a secure website that can infect you. And if you have what most people have, a firewall that's not able to check that. So this is something that's new. It's a kind of an emerging threat. It's something that we can talk more offline on. For the sake of time, I'll move on, but it's big. Patch management is huge, and also not only on the Microsoft products. I have clients tell me all the time, "Oh, Microsoft, I have it set to automatically patch." Well, let me tell you, Microsoft is terrible at patching itself. And you need to have a third-party product that does that patching and manages that patches, because a lot of times it needs user intervention in order to complete a patch. And it's a bigger story, but ultimately, if you're using Microsoft to do your patching on an automated basis, you're failing. And another thing is that you need to patch. There's basically 150 or so other common softwares that businesses use, like GoToMeeting, Flash, Chrome, Adobe, so on and so on and so on, 150 of them that you guys are using. You need to have those patches, because patches in general, about 80% of them are security related. They, there's no piece of software that's ever really secure because a man built it. Well, the problem with even Macintosh, they have exploits. They're just a smaller market segment, and the bad guys don't focus. They're just like anybody else. They want a high return on investment. They want to focus on, if there's 70% of the market's PCs, and they're going to write a bad piece of software to steal data from you or encrypt your data, they're going to do it to the 70% of the market, not the 30%. So it's important to patch, and then also it's important to run a deep scan. Our tools automatically run a deep scan on a nightly basis. I said earlier that statistically, whenever somebody gets a bad piece of software, malicious, something that's stealing data from you, it lives on that machine, and they harvest information from you for a year. Well, this type of product we run it nightly, doing that deep scan. It's kind of doing it the old way, where it takes a lot of system resources, so you can't do it during the day. So, and most people won't do it because they're busy. Same reason they won't run their updates. Your machine needs to run updates. You're like, man, I ain't got an hour to let that thing run. All that needs to be scheduled after hours. And getting down to the data backup here and business continuity, it's important for you to ask yourself questions as to how long you can be without your data. because in a cloud-based environment, let's say that you're backing up every night at midnight. It's going out into the cloud. And let's say your backup is indeed working. I already warned you that one of the biggest problems is that people are not managing and monitoring their backups. They just think it works. That's a no-no. That's bad for you. And but say that it did. It backed up last night. And let's say that it's 10 o'clock in the morning right now, and you start at work at 8 o'clock. Well, you have 2 hours at risk of loss of data, but you also have to now get say it's your server went bad. You have to get a new server. Well, you can't go to Walmart and buy a new server. You can't go to Best Buy and buy a new server, so you got to order one. And there's a process that takes usually 2 to 4 days. I've been doing this a long time, I know. 2 to 4 days is going to take you to get that data back, and it's important that you can tolerate that, or you move to the next thing here, business continuity. There's solutions out there that are affordable nowadays, and that can actually have that server restarted in 15 minutes, and it backed up an hour ago. So you limit the amount of data that's lost, and you limit the recovery time where you're back in business drastically. So we're real big fans of business continuity type solutions. They're very affordable, and you need to look into that. Now, finally, I want to talk to you a little bit about SIEM and SOC. Because I'm a certified information system security professional, and because I have a large client base that we serve, I was able to provide some services that really small businesses just simply cannot get. And if you're in a compliance situation where you need, like you're being, held to compliance for PCI, your credit card processing, or HIPAA, the medical industry, or FINRA, the financial advisors out there, and things like that, you really are required to have this type of technology in place. And I talked a little bit earlier about being able to collect large amounts of data called big data, and then be able to ask questions of that data to find anomalies or possible bad things that are happening. That's called artificial intelligence. Well, this is ultimately what's going on here. Load an agent on your machine, it collects all of the log files, and then it reviews those log files, and if an anomaly happens, a human looks at it to determine if it's malicious, and an activity, meaning, hey, I'm going to disconnect that machine from the network automatically. Hey, I'm going to report, I'm going to call and act immediately on this. I'm going to disconnect it and I'm going to call. And there's different levels of real-time alerting and system behavior management that happens based off of what's going on that machine. And from a forensic standpoint, you can really deep dive into how that vulnerability was exploited, and how that risk came about, and what files were touched, and so on and so forth, so that you can make decisions as to who needs to be notified when something happens. Was this a security event, or was this a security breach? Well, it's hard to know that unless you have tools like this in place. So this is really a major component in the overall security of a network. And I'm going to tell you, in probably 5-10 years, everyone will have a SOC service that's running across all their data, because the risk is we got to make it harder on these bad guys, and this is a great way to do it. And if you were to have to go into a courtroom, this forensic side of what this product does is jam up. It's exactly what they want, and so it's all kind of being done for you, and you get those compliance reporting on given basis, so that you can prove that you're doing your due care. All right, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is, I think we could talk offline on this, how this stuff really works. It's absolutely fascinating, and being able to keep you safe, it's really important. And I guess what I'll say here is that it's secure, because the information that's being passed around here and the way that it's being managed, they don't see the files on the computer. They see the activity and the logging of what's happening, not the file itself. So it's a secure way that the data is transported securely. securely, it's stored securely, and even the data itself is not something that is the client's personal identifiable information, but it is the activity on how the system's using that information, if you will. Here's a guess here. The number of logs generated per hour for a small business network. You come up with a number in your head, I'll reveal it. A server with 5 workstations is kind of this model right here. Is generating 250,000 logs per hour. It's impossible for a human to look over those and to know what's going on. This tool is something very valuable in doing that in real time. We spent some time here, and I tell you, time is a non-renewable resource, and I always want to, bring that to people's attention. I hope you had an aha moment. I hope there's something that you can do there that we're gonna, you're gonna do to I don't want you to be the ostrich with your head in your sand. You need to take some action here, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And the fate of your business in our environment is often in the hands of others, the way you've positioned yourself. Most people I talk with in this environment, they have a IT guy. I got a guy. And, I just say this, not in degrading that guy. I'm sure he's a great guy, but I'm telling you, I've done this 20 years. I know the threats that are out there. It is so difficult. And I got a guy, can't answer the phone, do the billing, secure your network, make sure the backups are happening, doing all that. And oftentimes whenever I do an audit, and that's what I'm going to offer you, is I find that ultimately you've hired somebody to answer the phone and to protect you, and they're simply not doing it. So for everybody that's struggled through this with me, and I hope this has been valuable to you, I really do. I'm going to give you a free ransomware vulnerability audit for your company. This is your company's biggest risk, and when I get finished with this and give that report of findings for you, you're really going to find that it's going to lower your risk. It's going to help protect you. And we're also going to give security and compliance training to your entire staff. Kind of my calling, my goal here is to help protect businesses here on the Gulf Coast, to raise awareness so that they can, enable it so that we're not sitting ducks. We're not easy targets. So usually we charge $800 to do this. And again, I don't want you to confuse this with a full-blown security risk assessment, because it's not, but it is a long ways down that road for you to know your risk. If you're going to be a well-informed entrepreneur and business owner, you need to know your risk. And when I finish that, we're going to do it. And ultimately, who's this for? It's for anybody that's really been on this seminar. And, I think it's important. I really do. I want to thank you again, and all you have to do is fill out the form below, and I'll reach out to you. We'll schedule a time that works for you. This is it's called a passive scan. It's not going to collect any real data. We can sign a non-disclosure, and anything that I do, I've been doing this 20 years. I would never, ever in a million years expose anything that's going to hurt anybody. We want to do good and not evil. Matter of fact, when you take a CISSP certification, that's one of the documents that you have to sign. You have to memorize the oath, and ultimately that's what it says. It says you're going to use your power for good and not evil, and that's really what I want to do. So fill out the form below. I look forward to meeting with you personally. I do these things myself personally. I'm the most qualified in our company to do it at this level, and I want to meet with you. I want to figure out how we can help you. So I want to thank you for attending. If you have any questions, you can always reach out, and I hope you have a great day.